Now let's think about this. We have a rose with different shades of green. We have blue. So selecting this can be a nightmare. So sometimes when you want to select something, you want to select the opposite. So what do we see in this picture that's the opposite? We have one color, this maroon looking color. Wouldn't it be great if we could just select the maroon color and then invert the selection so we select the rose? That would be a good idea. And you know what? I can use a magic wand tool, choose a tolerance of maybe 5. I know it's maroon, but it could be 1, but I'm going to choose 5. I'm going to unsample contiguous because I want to sample all of the maroon wherever it is in this layer. Now let's click. Okay. Now let's choose select, inverse, shortcut, shift, control I, or control shift I is what I call it. It's another handy one to know. Control shift I, very, very handy one to know. Inverse. Now let's look at the refine edge and see what it did. Let's look under the back. Look at that. Wow, I think I did that on what, 2 clicks? So you can see that depending on the situation and the photo, different tools are used. And I just want you to see different ways of using it within this one simple selection, or maybe hard selection. Let's look under the white. Okay, not bad. Not bad, not bad. Click cancel. Now, once you have a selection, you may want to save it because you may not want to do this again. And let's say you took your time doing it. You can go over to select and you can say save selection, new. You could name it rose and you click OK. Now let's see what happens. Select, deselect. Now let's say that it took me 5 hours to select this rose and it was driving me crazy and I thank God I saved it. I accidentally closed the file and oh no, what happened? Make sure you save it, by the way. Just make sure you save it. Okay, so what can I do here? Well, let's go to select, load selection, and then choose rose, and then click OK. And there's my selection of my rose again. So see, saving selections can be handy also. Just make sure you save your file, okay? And you can load them at will. And if you notice, I can new selection, add to selection. So if I had an existing selection, I can add it to that or subtract or intersect, and I can even invert it within this load selection box. So it's pretty nice. Okay, now let's talk about this thing here called refine edge. So go ahead and click on it. We're going to use the on black. If you choose smooth, this will smooth those edges to make them the jagged edges a little bit smoother. So let's just go to the extreme. As you can see, it's made them really smooth. How can you tell? Watch. Unpreview. Now I'm checking the preview. See the difference? But sometimes when you smooth it, you can lose detail. See here, I'm losing a little bit of the vine area. So let me go back. Okay, so now let's look at the feathering. Make sure your preview is on. Make sure your preview is on. Now let's use the feathering and increase it dramatically. And as you can see, what's happening is some of the red, the maroon that was in that original picture is encroaching back onto the leaves because my feathering has become so soft that it's included some of the background. So you got to be careful with that. Okay, now let's talk about contract and expand. You can expand your selection or you can contract your selection. So maybe you have your selection perfect, but you just needed it just a little bit more contracted to bring it in. You can do it that way, or you can expand it. Usually with refine edge, it's a fine line between smooth feather and contract and expand. Just play around to basically get your selection you're happy with. Sometimes moving these all the way to the left and then starting is better. So maybe I want to smooth a little. Maybe I want to feather a little, just a hair. And maybe I want to contract it a little bit more. There you go. And once you're happy, you would click OK, or test it on different backgrounds to see how your selection is. Not bad. And you click OK. And then once you're happy with refine edge, you could select, save selection, and call it rose 2 or something of that sort. So that way, if you weren't happy with it, you could always go back to your original rose. Okay? Now that we have this selection, what can we do with it? Well, what we could do is we could get it away from this background. And what is a quick way of doing that? Well, press the move tool and then press Control J. Control plus J. This will move that selection to its own layer. Okay? And what do you mean? What do I mean by that? Watch this. So if I turn off the visibility of this layer, you can see that on this layer, layer 5, I have that same rose. See? And I can move it around independently of that background, so it's no longer part of it. Okay, so let me click undo. Undo. Now, what if I didn't know about Control J? Is there another way? Layer, new, layer via copy. See the Control J right there? And now we'll do the same thing. Turn off the visibility of the original, and there we have our rose. Now that we have our rose here, we're going to try to make 3 different roses and put it in a vase and put it in a frame. But we can see that this rose is humongous. I mean, I'm not looking for something, a huge photo, I'm just looking for a normal size. So let me go ahead and shrink this, and what I'm going to do is, I'm going to select this control point, press the shift key, excuse me, make sure your move tool is selected first, then press the shift key, and just go ahead and drag like that to constrain it, and then press the green check mark, and then we're going to rotate it in top position here. Then we're going to move the rose to the middle. And now that we have it, you can see here in the layer, now I can make 3 more copies. And how would I make 3 more copies quickly? Oh, excuse me, I got to commit it first. Okay, press Control J and Control J. And as you can see here, it made 2 more copies. And how do you know? Because now I can select the layer 5 copy 2 and rotate it here a little bit. And I can select layer 5. I got to commit it first, select layer 5, and I can drag this out. And this looks nice. Not really, but it needs some masking, some coloring, and I've done that. So let me go ahead and just delete those layers because I just want to show you what you can do with that Control J. I'm going to delete the layer, yes. Delete the layer, yes. And delete the layer, yes. And this is what I've done. So I first shrank it, rotated it, masked it a little, created the other rows, I added some photo filter to it, I added some brightness, I added the 3rd rose in, gave a little hue saturation to make it a little bit different. Okay, layer 4 doesn't need to be there, so I'll just delete because it's an empty layer. And then I added a base, as we can see here, and then I added a frame. We'll turn on the visibility of the frame, but we can see the frame is too small, obviously. And we have this white thing in the middle, and what's the quickest way to get rid of one color? Use the magic wand and just click in the middle. Oh, make sure contiguous is checked. And then you can press delete, and now delete the frame. And remember, you can look at refine edge and see how it would look. Click OK. Great. Now I'm going to select deselect. I need to increase the size of this frame. How can I do that? Since this frame is active, I can press a shortcut I'll tell you about later called Control T. Control T. And then press the shift key to constrain the proportions and drag this frame out. And then move within it. Okay, move this down just a little bit more. Okay. Perfect. Now this looks awfully, there's no color for the background of the frame. How can I do that? Well, we know we can create. Oh, first let me click the green commit. I'm sorry, sometimes I forget about that. There you go. We can create a new layer by going to Layers panel and click Create New Layer. We can sample a color. So let me turn this layer on. So this is the layer I want to sample. Select the eyedropper tool. Sample this color, which we'll put it in the foreground color. Turn the visibility of that layer back off. Make sure that layer 3 is visible. That's the most top layer. Okay, so I've chosen the paint bucket. I got to make sure the contiguous is not checked. All layers is not checked. So I just want to fill this layer with that color. As I've done, it just instructed everything. That's fine, because we're going to drag that layer to the bottom here. See how I dragged it and put it right under this layer, so it just has this. And then you're saying, but this looks horrible. Well, this is where the crop tool comes in. I'm going to make sure I reset the tool, and then I'm going to crop it. And there you have it. Now let's increase. Okay, and there we have our nice little wooden frame with the flowers inside. It's something simple, silly, but I just want to show you what you can do with selections.